the next generation of warfare, psychological warfare. In modern conflict, the mind is a potent weapon. Discover General Michael T. Flynn's groundbreaking guide, A Citizen's Guide to Fifth Generation Warfare. Unlock tactics, strategies, and the mindset to navigate this cognitive battlefield that we all find ourselves in. Equip yourself against manipulation and emerge unscathed. Unleash your potential. Order now.
This time, it's children. I mean, not that children haven't been liberated and captive before, but we've never seen this before. Like again, I'm a very spiritual person, right? And I see demonic forces. Yes. For the first time in maybe the history of the world, their focus is children. Hurt children, hurt children. Call it good, package it in this nice thing that sounds like tolerance and whatever, minor attracted persons, all that crap, right? But never in the history of the world have I seen like satanic forces zeroing in on just children. And so it's our responsibility as Americans to live what we've learned, to stay true to the legacy that we've created to liberate the captive. And it's time to do that. And it's time to look at the children, the millions of children who are sex slaves and slave labor and organ harvesting victims around the world, and begin to liberate them.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to this week's episode of the Daily 302. Before we introduce Tim here, I wanted to offer up an apology for no show last week. I mean, many of you have heard that we had to put my American Bulldog Sammy to sleep last week, so it was pretty tough around here. And for those of you that have reached out about that, a sincere thank you. These dogs end up like your kids, so really appreciate everybody reaching out about that. So, but also everybody's wrapping up holiday week this week. For most of you, but here on the Jewish side of things, we just began the festival of Hanukkah last night, so we're in day 2, and we're going to be carrying this all the way to January 2nd this year, which is really weird that this has fallen so late in the year for this. So tonight we are going to be back into discussing very, very difficult topics, but topics that are needed to. And it's my honor and pleasure to have this American hero that is leading the fight on rescuing children from trafficking. Mr. Tim Ballard, welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you so much, man. Honored to be here.
Yeah, it's really good to meet you. I know we're running around in the same circles, and I don't know if we've had much time to talk about what this show is dedicated to, but ever since probably of October of last year, we've been doing nothing but focusing on the border invasion and all of the trafficking that's been happening attached to that, to try to get people to wake up, understand what's going on and how bad this really is, and how many children are actually missing versus what we're hearing in the media, right? So that's what this show is dedicated to, and I want to have subject matter experts like yourself to come on here and just discuss these type of things. But Tim, since it's your first time, man, I'm pretty sure that a lot of people know who you are, but what I like to do with first-time guests, because I don't expect people to be a first-time and only time. I expect that we're going to develop this friendship and continue this thing on and have multiple shows in the future. So if you don't mind, let's talk a little bit about like where you're from, your background, where you grew up, your family life, before we move into the dark stuff.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, so I born and raised in Southern California. My first job was at the CIA and working on terrorism issues. But I served a mission for the LDS Church, so I speak fluent Spanish, and ended up on the border in 2003. After 9/11, I had learned that, we learned that Muhammad Atta, one of the terrorists, had actually staged in Mexicali, Mexico, and crossed the border. And I had studied. I have a graduate degree in international politics with an emphasis in terrorism, which I was getting just before 9/11 happened. And I just wanted to be on that border, man, to stop terrorists. So I switched from the CIA over to the newly established Homeland Security Investigations, DHS, and I found myself 6 months on the border doing what I thought I was there to do, and then got called into the child crimes group, the child trafficking group, and I didn't even know what that was. But we'll get into that. But I have 9 children of my own.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, two of them we adopted, that we rescued from a trafficking organization in Haiti. There's actually a documentary on Prime that you can watch called Operation Toussaint, which kind of tells that story. It's also the subject of Santa Freedom 2, which is going into pre-production right now. So,
oh wow.
So I had 9 children. My oldest is 24. My youngest is 9, and married to an awesome woman who I love named Catherine. So, and my after I learned for 10 years what was going on at that border, even in like the good times, man, my focus also right now is the border and rescuing these kids. And it's crazy it's tragic, really. I have to go into Mexico and work with Mexicans to rescue children, work with Mexican authorities to rescue children from America. And that is a tragic place to be as an American. We can no longer trust that our border officials are rescuing kids. In fact, my Orcus just said last week, it's not my job. What do you mean it's not my job to rescue kids? That's what he said. Because he can't answer for what we believe is up to 500,000 now missing children. And having worked on that border, I understand it completely. I understand how it works, how it's the greatest opportunity to rescue children with border enforcement. And instead, we're facilitating the trafficking but with our agency. So anyway, I'll let you start asking questions. I'll just go now.
No, that's kind of how the platform is set up, man. Is you run as long until you run out of words or you run out of breath. I'm not going to cut you off if I don't need to, especially. But no, that's great about your family. That's a wide range of ages right there. So I've got 2 boys myself. My wife and I have been married. We just hit our 30-year mark in October. Our boys are 28 and 24. The youngest one just got married back in mid-November. So, wow. And the other one's getting married next May. So time flies by, man. Especially when you have kids early,
Yep, that's what we did too. So we had them late too, I guess.
Well, I'm pretty sure I'm done. I'm waiting on grandkids at this point. So, so yeah, let's talk about what's going on at the border. I mean, obviously, you're working with a mutual friend, Ryan Maddow, on another documentary, which I don't want to talk about that one just yet. We'll save that towards the end. But Ryan's a great guy. Him and JJ have 2 great documentaries. I'm pretty sure you probably have already seen them, Tim.
Yeah, amazing, groundbreaking. Yeah.
So let's talk about your work at the border and stuff that you kind of want the public to know, prior to people knowing who you are because of Sound of Freedom. And then once we talk about a little bit of that work, we'll move into how you got tapped for Sound of Freedom. And I didn't know there was a second one coming out. So
pre-production right now. But yeah, speaking of Sound of Freedom, I guess I can start there. There's a scene there that in the film that was actually filmed on location exactly where this thing happened, where the little boy is rescued out of that van. And at the time when we filmed it, there was no border issue, because it hadn't been politicized. Right. But when the movie came out, it had become an issue because I don't know if you know, the movie sat on the shelf for 5 years. No one wanted to touch it for 5 years.
I did know that.
No one wanted to touch it until Angel Studios took it, and then it became the #1 movie in the world, in 23. But Yeah, Disney owned it for a bit and gave it. I mean, it's just crazy. They did not want to talk about this. But the film proves the point. I mean, that little boy was rescued because of a wall, and it wasn't politicized. Everybody knew it on the left and the right. I mean, the Clinton administration, historically speaking, has built more of the wall than any other administration, because everybody knew, all of us on the board that are working knew that border enforcement and the wall is what gave the final opportunity to rescue a kid before they get into the black market or to interdict drugs. And so I really blame, more than anyone, I blame Kamala Harris for starting this whole thing in 2016. She just had to oppose everything that Trump was supporting. And so she had to say, call the wall a vanity project. And she had to say it's ineffective, it doesn't do anything. And it was so sad. She politicized it and then continued, obviously, up until the current day, to politicize it and even weaponize it for power. I remember just being shocked, thinking about, having experienced what I did at the border. And I in 2016, when she was running against Trump, well, I guess she was running in the primaries, but she was attacking Trump a lot because he was talking about the border. And I remember a post that she did once that scared the heck out of me. And then when she became our border czar, even more so, she put a post out that said, it showed this mass interdiction of cocaine at, I think it was the same port of entry in Calexico, California, where I rescued that little kid. And she said, see, this is proof. We don't need to build walls because most of the interdictions happen at the ports of entry. And I thought to myself, what are you saying? I mean, 2 + 2 = 4, sister. Like, what are you talking about? There is no port of entry without walls.
Yeah.
Earl Buchanan, the guy depicted in the film, he would have not gone through the port of entry, and that little boy wouldn't have been rescued had he not been forced to go through the port of entry, thanks to the wall, right? And I have other cases, examples where kids were smuggled in, sex trafficked out of the wall-less portions of the southern border, and they end up, being rape victims for their entire childhood. And I talked to one, and I remember talking to her after we had helped her with some of her aftercare, and she said, "Why wasn't there a wall for me? Had there been a port of entry, I would have yelled out. I would have said, 'Someone help me,' and someone would have helped me." And it's so tragic what has happened when Kamala and Biden came in and just completely started turning our agencies into child trafficking delivery services.
Oh, it's the largest organization in the world.
Absolutely. And DHS and HHS and the NGOs that they give billions of dollars to are child trafficking delivery services. Yeah. I mean, I'm working in Mexico now because I can't do anything on this side. And these NGOs, right, they're these CEOs making millions of dollars a year. They want the flow to continue. It's their lifeblood. So they've now forward deployed these NGOs into Mexico, working hand in hand with the traffickers to make it easier to move the kids so they can get into their establishments and so they can keep their contracts rolling with the federal government. It's the most disgusting thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, you're saying that Catholic Charities, Jewish Family Services, and all these other ones that are majorly working here with them are now on the Mexico side?
They're now on the Mexico side, and they're working hand in hand with the traffickers to facilitate the movement, the continuous movement of these children, as opposed to doing what we're doing, the exact opposite. Fortunately, I have, I was sitting next to, have you seen Line in the Sand? James O'Keefe?
I have not seen that one yet. No, I know about it. I haven't seen it yet.
It's pretty good. It's really good at exposing all of this. And I was sitting next to him at the premiere in Newport Beach, and I leaned over to him. I said, "Hey, why aren't you rescuing those kids?" Because he actually, what he did was he went onto the caravan. It's a phenomenal film. He goes onto the caravan with his team and documents what it's like to be smuggled across and what happens to the kids. I'm like, "There's kids right there. Why don't you rescue them?" He's like, "I don't know how. I don't know who to trust." And I said, "Well, that's where I guess that's where I come in, because I've worked in Mexico for almost 20 years. I know who to trust. I know the trustworthy authorities, and I'm working with them right now on the Mexican side to rescue the kids there and find their families from Mexico. Whether we've seen kids from Morocco, most of them are from Central America. Guatemala is probably the number one country, and so I'm having to work with Mexican authorities now to combat the U.S. government, who are and as far as I see it, are traffickers. But I don't know how else to describe what they're doing. And I don't blame the individuals necessarily. I think a lot of them go in with they started it with good hearts. Like, what do we do with all these kids? It's really a policy matter that Biden and Kamala began. Look, there's 40 million who they see as Democratic voters now coming into the country, and it's no coincidence that they open up and call for the surge of migration to happen at the same time that they're lobbying in every state for no voter ID policies, right? They know what they're doing. They're trying to stay in power, and they're doing it at the cost of children. They have the blood of children on their hands for doing that. And this whole thing, I hear people push back on me, say, well, maybe they just don't know. And I said, no, that's not going to work with me. I've testified 3, maybe 4 times before Congress, 1 time before the Senate Judiciary Committee, of which Kamala Harris was a member. I know that she knows. I know she knows the details. I know that she knows that she's hurting kids, and by politicizing something that never should have been politicized, and that's what's going on. We have become a trafficking state, and it's horrendous.
Yeah, man, I think that Tim, that is only by the grace of God that he has allowed President Trump to win this election, and they weren't allowed to steal this one. And I firmly believe that one of the major reasons that we're going to be in this transition period, right? But I fully believe that it is attached to all of this trafficking that's happening in this country, and that we're facilitating it around the world. And remember, I mean, you know this better than I do, is that they were using the foster care system for decades and decades, right? So my thinking, and by talking to other people that are doing what you're doing, is like that I don't want to say the wrong word here, but that inventory is gone, right? So they're trying to find additional ways by bringing them across the world, across the border, up into our country, and facilitating it that way. Is that how you see it?
And it's important to note that the United States, for the last decade, we've been the number 1 producers and consumers of child rape videos. We are the demand. And when I started out my career, we were hunting American tourists who would go into Colombia or go into Thailand, and we'd go hunt them down under U.S. law, which allowed us to hold them accountable for sex acts against children as if they had committed the crimes in the U.S. And now they don't have to travel anymore.
No.
They're delivered to their homes, and delivered by who? By us, by our government, paid for by our taxpayer dollars. I mean, if you know what happens to these kids, they come across, and even when Trump was in power and enforcing the border, we had to deal with something called the Flores settlement. The Flores settlement was a decision that was made by a well-intended judge, I think well-intended, who said you can't keep a child for more than a certain amount of time, and the child must be delivered. You can't keep a child in cages, as the AOC cages. No, those aren't cages. Those are safe houses. Those are the ones that got rescued. But because of the Flores settlement, it said that if you have a kid with you, then you have to be released into the country within 72 hours, I think. But they've expanded it a bit, but not by much. And so what would happen, even under Trump, was, even when we were enforcing the border, is the smugglers and traffickers would take these kids and pair them up with a fake parent, and they would just let them through, and then the kid would be trafficked. After they used the kid to get to smuggle the people across, and then the kid would be just abused as well. And so Trump installed, he was combating that by installing biometrics, rapid DNA technology. One of the first things Biden did is he comes in and rips that program away. No more DNA tests. And the answer. I worked for the Trump administration. I was the chairman of the the White House anti-trafficking committee, and where we were going with that the ultimate solution is you simply put all of our asylum courts, you put our immigration courts, everything as an adjacent infrastructure to our embassies. And then, it's not pro border enforcement. It's not anti-immigration. I have 2 immigrant children. I'm very pro-immigration, but you have to de-incentivize the movement. And
Yeah.
you do that by Remain in Mexico policy, which Trump had in place. You do that by eventually moving all of our systems into our embassies. So only the honest will show up, and then Biden comes in and does the total opposite, right? No border enforcement means incentive for traffickers, and they gamed the system and started using our institutions to facilitate, the hardest part of the trafficking. The hardest part is getting them across and then delivering them to the consumer. That's the hardest part for a trafficker, and that part is now taken care of by your taxpayer dollars.
Yeah. And the other part of all this too, Tim, is I talk about this all the time with other guests, is that most people are unfamiliar with the International Nationality Act, which, lists all the laws and everything that's attached to the border, which inclusive of how people can come over here and claim asylum, right? And all the reasons that they have. And the Biden administration has done away completely with that document, right? And all of these people are just coming in here and saying that they're claiming asylum when there's no legal reasons for them to do so.
They're not even crying a reason. I'm down there as I'm watching it happen. The average court date for their asylum court is in 4 years, in 2028. And they literally come across the border. They don't even have to say anything. They don't even tell them anything. They don't even say why they're seeking asylum. First of all, it's illegal to seek asylum unless you go to a port of entry. That's law. And Border Patrol just gives them their little tag right there. Here you go. See you in court. 90% of them never show up. They know they're not going to show up. and it's backlogged 4 years. So there's the asylum process is a complete joke. It's not even completely non-functional.
Since you're on the Mexico side, I want to focus a little bit on that if we can. It's like kind of explain to people, because most of us, what we're seeing, because not even on the legacy media, right? So we're the real true media at this point. But everything that we're seeing, and that Ryan and JJ put in their documentary, is we're seeing just massive amounts of people just coming across the border, right? But not a lot of people understand the whole cartel point of all this, or part of it, and how all of these kids are just being ripped from their families. How is that happening? What does that look like? Is this the case pretty much with all of them, or is a lot of people don't understand the cartel piece to all of this?
Yeah, so it's a great question. It's super important people understand this. So the cartels are making about $14 million a day. The New York Post reported that, and I concur. This is a massive, massive operation. And what they're doing, it's interesting. Last year, I had the opportunity to brief the president of Honduras. And the very next day, I briefed the president of Guatemala. And what's interesting, the president of Honduras is super socialist. The president at the time in Guatemala is super conservative. And just to show that it's not political, they both said the same thing. They said, your border policies are destroying us. The percentage of missing children in these countries has just surged. And they don't have the resources to deal with that. I've interviewed parents. I've talked to parents. A kid goes missing here in the U.S., you have a pretty decent law enforcement response. A kid goes missing in Guatemala, forget about it. They don't have the resources to deal with it, and no one's even reporting it. But it's thousands of kids are just disappearing because it's very easy to kidnap a child with little consequence, and then they got them and they know where they're taking them. So then they put the kids on, they either walk them, bus them, use airplanes, and this is where there's a difference between smuggling and trafficking, but the cartels are doing both, right? So there's a bunch of people who they want nothing to do with the sex trade. They just want to get into the United States, right? And so they go to the cartels. A lot of them end up getting trafficked because it costs about $3,000 to $5,000 per person, and they'll get you into the United States. And most of them don't have that money, and so they give them what they have, and they say, well, you can pay the rest later. Well, what they do is they'll traffic them along the way to get their money out of them. And then when they get to the U.S., they can control really where they go. Not all of them end up, going through the DHS, HHS cycle, a lot of them just go through and don't get on the bus, but get in a car, get into someone else's truck. And then so the smugglees become trafficked. The smugglers become traffickers. So, and then others are it's just pure trafficking. It's kidnap, it's smuggle, it's sell to the other side. These kids, a lot of them, most of them, almost all of them, you know the ones who aren't coming in with their real family because they'll have a phone number, sometimes written on their chest, sometimes on their arm, sometimes a little piece of paper in their pocket, and that's the sponsor. So the children come across, and DHS takes them, immediately turns them over to HHS. HHS turns them over to the NGO, and the NGO says, "Oh, this is your sponsor phone number." And the NGO then calls the number, and they say, "Hi, I have Jorge Ramirez here." "Oh, yeah. Where should I send him?" "To this address." "Okay. You know him?" "Yes." You're his uncle?" "Well, yeah, I'm his uncle." "Okay, that's about it." And then they get the address. They put the kids on the plane, train, automobiles, ship them to the consumer, whoever it is. That's about the extent of the vetting. Now you got these heroes like Tara Rodas and others, right, who went into these NGOs working with a real intent, and they're like, "What are we doing?"
Yeah.
We're sending, and then she would go in and do like searches, and like that he's a convicted pedophile. Like literally, she would like do more research than she was supposed to do, and just on her own was discovering this.
Or we have no terrorists or sponsors too.
Absolutely, and these NGOs do not have to share their databases with FBI, with DHS. It's totally siloed off, so there's zero overlap, there's zero oversight, and the NGOs are going to make sure that it stays that way. Because like Tara Rodas, you should have her on your show if you.
I need to get connected to her, so I may rely on.
I'll connect you. I'll connect you directly.
Okay.
So she comes out and she says, "What are we doing?" And her supervisor says, "Listen, we don't get sued by delivering these children within the small window of time we have. We will get sued by the federal government and lose our contract if we break the Flores settlement and keep these kids longer than the prescribed time." And she said, and that's when it just hit her. She's like, I'm trafficking children. And the NGOs want to keep it quiet because they're making billions of dollars in government contracts. So they're extremely compromised. So that's kind of the run of it. That's how it works. And it's not just kids from Central America. It's kids from all over the place. I was working with the Sonora State Police recently. A mother from Morocco fell off the train near Hermosillo, Mexico, and her 4-year-old daughter was by herself, and we can't find her. She's gone. We've been looking for her for a couple months.
Wow.
But I mean, it's international. The cartels are running this from all over the world and bringing them into the U.S.
See, one of the things I want Trump to do once he gets in there is to declare war on the cartels, man. I mean, if we can just destroy them, how much of this would be eliminated, you know?
Absolutely, and he offered that to the AMLO administration, and he turned it down. He said, "Let's go to war." He's like, "We'll bring our people in with your people, and let's just destroy them." He has been semi-effective in the tariff threats. You know, he says, "Look, you either stop this and push the people back, or I'm going to put crazy tariffs immediately when I get in the White." He already told the new president of Mexico. He said, if you don't start now, in January, you're going to have a crazy tariff on all your goods coming in. And I don't need Congress to approval to do it. And so she started immediately deploying troops to the border. So there's that, and then of course, really the final answer is to de-incentivize border enforcement and move our immigration processes into the countries with our embassies. And that would end it. There's no loopholes. There's no incentive. There's no way they're not going to make it. They're not going to be able to. You'll shut them down. You'll shut them down. But in the meantime, I'm all for waging every angle of war against them, and just destroying them, because they've ruined Mexican society. These cartels anyway. So It's too bad AMLO, President of Mexico, turned down that offer from Trump. This next president is just as socialist, more so. But is not a Trump fan. But
didn't she release a bunch of more migrants out of that camp that was down in southern Mexico at the same time that she supposedly was going to send troops to the border?
Yeah, we're looking into that to verify, but yeah, because and that's important to bring up is there's these camps all along the cartel route, and that's where you find the rape trees and that's where you find the NGOs from the United States who are in those camps facilitating the process, um, and that needs to be the target. That's the place where you go rescue kids in those camps.
So I have multiple things that are flowing through my brain, but talk about what it means when you say that you're rescuing kids. So I'm hearing you talk about James O'Keefe. Like, why didn't you just rescue a bunch of these kids and take them out of whatever vehicle they were in being trafficked? Talk to people about, because I know a bunch of organizations that are doing this, right? So Craig Sawyer's doing it, Doc Peters is doing it, and you're doing it. I'm trying to get everybody to understand what it means when we're hearing people say we're rescuing kids.
So basically, the idea, and we have some ongoing operations, so I can't get too detailed, but the idea is, look, you have the opportunity under Mexican authority, right, to combat human trafficking. So if anywhere along that route, and anywhere along that route, and we're going to start opening up in Guatemala the same program, we've already begun talking to them about this. We can go into those cartels, into the caravans, whether it's a moving caravan or one of the camps, and the idea is basically infiltrate. You infiltrate the camps, you infiltrate the caravans, identify the children who have phone numbers on their arms, and start and just pull them right out. And then you begin the process of locating their families. So then we that's why we need to work with Guatemala and Honduras and Nicaragua and have a program set up where we can immediately begin to identify the families who are just suffering beyond measure. Their kids are missing, and they all know where they're going. That's the thing. I said, do you know where your kids are going? I was in Dominican Republic 3 weeks ago, and they said, and they were ignorant to our border issue, and I was doing a media tour, and they said we lost 1,000. I think he said 1,000 kids this year. Just disappeared. And I said, and they said, no one knows where they are. And I said, I know where they are. And they're like, what? Like, how do you? So they're in the United States. Like, and they were clueless, it's just like, but these other countries in Central America are not so clueless. They've started education campaigns about, don't get on the caravan. Don't believe the friendly face. They were running in Guatemala. They're running radio ads for a time. The cartels. Hey, if you want to go to the United States, just call this number and we'll hook you up. And they're trapping kids too, left and right. They go onto social media and just lure a kid. It's very easy to lure a kid out with their cell phone to any location you want by pretending to be some kid their age, and they're disappearing that way too. And then they get them on the caravan and they're gone. And it used to be that we could rely on the American tradition to liberate the captive, to know that, hey, you try to bring him here, we're going to rescue him. It's tragic, man. I mean, that was my 10 years on the border. We were those guys. We were that country that was, if you tried this, we're going to rescue those kids at the border. Now we are the traffickers. That fast. We are the facilitators. And so we have to go into Guatemala and Mexico and do the rescues there instead of where they should be happening in the U.S.
Yeah. One of the things that, all these other guys that I'm talking to that come on my show and then we're talking about stuff, we're kicking around ideas of like, how do all of us just find a way to work together? Because, I mean, even though we're getting the president back, right, we only got 2 years. We don't know what's going to happen in 2 years, for midterms and so on and so forth. And this is not going to go away. It's not going to be an easy fix. It's going to be a total bloodbath at some point here. And people need to really understand that that's what's going to happen. So my next thing, Tim, is with the organization that you're with now, you're doing the stuff that's doing the rescuing of the kids, right? I want to know if there's teams that are attached to you guys or attached to these other organizations. If anybody out there is listening and they want to reach out to me, I want to know how all of these organizations work, because there's got to be ways for anybody who wants to get involved can get involved. So my thing is I want to know if you're taking them phone numbers and you're giving them to another team and somebody's going and tracking these assholes down. That's what I want to know.
Yeah, the truth is we need a lot more help, and you're right. We need to do a better job of coordinating these efforts. There's very few of us, relatively speaking, that are out there doing this, and luckily because of my connections with the Mexican government, we have the access to really armies that are willing to respond if we give them the intel. So we need a lot more coordination. We need a lot more resources because you're absolutely right. This is not gonna go away easy. These cartels making $14 million a day, right? I mean, they've gamed the system so far. Trump's gonna shut down a lot of it pretty quick, but they're not gonna give up easily. This is gonna be a bloodbath.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that's the thing is I want to continue to bring on guys like you, so people that are show that want to get involved in it. And that's why I keep telling everybody, dude, there's no more border states. This is every single one of us. Every single state has all of these illegals here. Has all of this trafficking is here. I mean, we're talking about 500,000 children that are missing in 4 years' time, and it's most likely going to be more than that by the time he walks out of there in 20 some days.
It's exactly right. We need more resources. We need more coordination. We need bigger teams. I mean, I feel like tiny when we go into these places. Even our team at Aerial Recovery, there's just not enough being done, and it's so tragic. That we have to do the job of the U.S. government because the resources are available. They're just being deployed on the side of the traffickers. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I think there's got to be ways for teams in every state to be put together. I'm telling you, Tim, I've been called by people that have listened to this show that are in the state of Kansas, or they've sent people that they know to reach out to me because they know for a fact that there's children being trafficked in this city, in mines in the city of Hutchinson, Kansas, and it's like we just can't sit back with this
That's
information.
Right. And we need to convert people to this cause, like you said. What you said was so important. There is no border states. Every state's a border state. And I mean, Tom Holman's got a huge task sitting before him right now. He had the mayor of Chicago came out recently and said Tom Holman's not welcome here. So this is what I'm talking about. This is the fight, right? It's to convert people to understanding these kids aren't coming in and staying in Arizona and California. The vast majority of them are going to New York, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, all over the United States, and that's where they're being trafficked. And the traffickers are coming to your city, and when you foment that kind of market, it puts all your kids, in danger as well. You're building these child sex markets, and it puts us all in danger. So people got to wake up. Hats off to Eric Adams, who was against Trump on almost everything until recently. He finally broke. He's a former cop, and he broke, and he just was like, look, this is the mayor of New York City, and he's like, I'm on Trump's side. I'm going to work with Holman. We got to stop this. We see it. We see the effects. So we need to be able to start breaking political, lines and start doing the right thing here, because this is everyone's problem now.
Yeah. All right, we got about 19 minutes left, Tim. I want to move into the documentaries because I feel like your first documentary with Jim was talking about a story that I think a lot of people probably, well, not that specific story, but we knew the trafficking was happening out of those countries, right? But I feel like what God's probably doing with you with the second one, and now what you're doing with Ryan, is to show a bigger picture of how bad the United States has become this trafficking organization, right? So now talk about the second Sound of Freedom, and then we'll move into talking about your work with Ryan.
Well, the Sound of Freedom 2 is it's a story. It's kind of like the first one. It's a story that has to do with basically in Haiti. Haiti's probably one of the highest trafficking nations in the world because the infrastructure just collapsed completely. And so it's based on a true story that happened there. It's actually the story of the two kids who are now my children.
Oh,
And
wow.
they're depicted in the film, not as major players, but I kind of just gave away the end of the movie there, but uh, yeah. So it's a story, a true story about a little boy. Really, his name's Gardy Marty, who was a Haitian ancestry but a U.S. citizen, and his family moved back to Haiti for a bit, and he was kidnapped and trafficked, and we tried to go rescue him. I was at DHS at the time. It was actually happening simultaneous to what you see happening in Sound of Freedom 1. We went to look for this little boy and didn't find him, but found a mess that we could not even comprehend. And looking for him, we found his traffickers, we found the organizations, and then the film goes in to talk about how the international movement of it into Mexico, into the Dominican Republic, and how it's connected. So yeah, we hope we're going to use this film as we are with Ryan's films to it's so much of it is about awareness. So much of it is about what you're doing. 100 million people saw Sound of Freedom, and we saw just a surge of NGOs popping up and governments changing policies. We have to convert the hearts and minds of people to see what is happening, and so that's the purpose behind all this media.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I like that. Is we've got to convert people to understanding this, and then I say this to everybody, Tim, is that I believe that one of the reasons that God created us and put us on this earth was to combat all the chaos that has been ensuing on the earth and in all of creation since the garden, right? And we've got a job to do, and this may not be everybody's thing, but I'm sorry when you've got children and kids that are being going through all this stuff. I think this should be everybody's mission at some level, and it's going to take all hands on deck to do it.
Absolutely. It's too big now, even for any one government. Even if that government's doing the right thing, it's going to take millions of people to stand up and do what they can do.
Yeah. All right. So what's the theme of Ryan's? From the clip we shared, it looks like that one is out already. So if you could talk a little bit about your work with Ryan, how'd you come to meet Ryan? I mean, I know Ryan because of the work he's been doing with JJ over the last 2 years at least.
So Ryan reached out to me several months ago and just said, "Hey, will you preview this documentary?" Which is the hashtag treason, right? The very first one. And I sat there with some friends, and I was just on fire because it was everything that I had been testifying to Congress over the last many years, but in effect, without effect. I mean, nothing. The needle didn't move, and I was like, I can't just do this. I can't just. No one even wants to believe these stories I'm telling. And then I watched Ryan's documentary, and he shows it to you, like it's right in front of you, right? I mean, the footage. You're watching these kids, they're being carried across the border, totally drugged up, babies, and they're drugged up. They couldn't wake up if they wanted to, and the thing that I really admire about Ryan is he's just fearless. He just says it. I mean, he says things that I'm embarrassed to admit I was probably afraid to say, before Congress or even publicly. He just goes right at the heart of it, and it's like, I mean, the documentary is like R-rated plus, and it needs to be. I mean, it is like, it's unbelievable what's happening, and he just goes right at it, and it's like no censors. This is the reality. This is what we're looking at here, and it was very refreshing to see someone who's willing to just, expose the whole thing right in front of you, right in your face. So.
Yeah, and JJ is the same way. I mean, it's funny. I tell people this story of how I met JJ, right? Because JJ's on my show every first Thursday of the month, and then I've got a couple of other regular guys that come on, the same time every month too. And I'm sitting here one night back, I don't know, a year or so ago, and I'm watching Real America's Voice with Stinchfield. I don't know if you ever watched Stinchfield's show. And he has this guy come on. I'm sitting there, and these guys comes on. He's talking about all the border invasion and all the trafficking, right? Well, on Stinchfield, whenever he has guests on the show, he puts in there where they're from. And the guy was JJ, and all of a sudden I'm listening to him, and it pops up that he's in Kansas City, Kansas, and I'm like, that's 10 minutes up the road from me. And I looked over at my wife. I'm like, this freaking guy lives here. I was like, I gotta find this guy. And Tim, as long as I've been doing this show, man, the hardest part about doing this show is networking and getting connected to the guests, right? So getting connected to you was somewhat difficult. It took me a little bit, but finally, God opened the door. But JJ, I reached out to him that night on X, and I said, hey, man, I just saw you on there, and my show's talking about the border. I was like, I'd like to connect with you and have you on my show. Guy messaged me back in like 5 minutes. and I found out that he lives like 20 minutes down the road from me.
Wow.
So we became friends, and just trying to help get his message out there, Ryan's message out there. And, it's one of those things, those are God connections, right? And I fully believe that this is an area that God is calling a lot of us to expose, to be involved in, and to work in. And it's not easy, right? I mean, I'm just a guy running a show right now. But I want to do more. I'm assuming that at some point I'm going to be doing more to help the fight, but it's just wild on how all of these things have come together, just for this show and meeting you finally and that kind of thing.
Well, hats off to you, man. We need more people like you doing this, and I recognize now, I love doing undercover work, but those days are done for me. So my job now is similar to yours. It's coordination, and it's media, and it's converting the hearts and minds of the world to see what is the biggest plague. It's it's slavery at its worst, and we've got to stop this myth that we killed slavery. We love to congratulate ourselves. No, we have not. It's worse than it's ever been, and the focus is children now. It's a great study to read what was happening in the 18th, 19th century in this country. They were in a similar place that we are. The Harriet Tubmans, like they were very small, and trying to convert the hearts and minds of the people to the idea of that slavery is real and how bad it is. And that's when it was legal in a lot of people's faces. We have a task that's in some ways harder in terms of converting the hearts and minds of people, because it is illegal, right? And everybody, including governments, have found the loopholes to make it functional nonetheless. So it's a harder task to expose it. And so thank God for people like Ryan and you and those and JJ and those who are willing to go into those dark places and shine a light, because that's the only way we're going to fix this.
Yeah, I can say that it's definitely a growing community. It's a very special group of individuals that I've come to realize and come to be a part of, and there's just so much to do. And I think that God's tapping the right people, man. He's just, I was going to bring up this real quick, is that I know that you're a big spiritual guy. I'm a big spiritual guy, and a lot of people probably don't know this, but there's a commandment in the Bible that if you kidnap somebody, do you know what the penalty for that is, Tim?
No.
It's death. And it's funny is that President Trump came out, there's a video, I think it came out today or yesterday, where he's talking about if anybody is found trafficking children inside this country, he's going to push for the penalty to be death.
That's right.
And that needs to happen.
It does need to happen, and we need to get behind him, because it will sound extreme to someone who doesn't see what's happening, and so that's why it's so important to expose it and just show it at its rawest, show exactly what it is. It's Harriet Beecher Stowe who wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin. It was the first big light, in 1850. She writes this book, and people are like, wait, what? What is happening? What are they doing to these people? The vast majority of Americans had no idea, didn't even know really what it was. And that was the thing that really started the Civil War. When Lincoln met Harriet Beecher Stowe for the first time during the Civil War, he said to her, "So you're the little lady that started this war." And he recognized it. That's what it was, and that's what we need. We need a war. We need, and the only way to do it is to repeat history. And we need Harriet Beecher Stowe's, like you and Ryan and the rest of us, to shine a light on it and show it what it is. Show it for what it is, and don't edit it. Don't censor it. Show what is happening.
Yeah, that's why I think all these documentaries that have been coming out just in the last 6 months with Ryan and JJ's too, Sound of Freedom 2, and the next one you got already out with Ryan. I mean, anything that I can do, Tim, to get those out, I want to be a part of that and help push them, because I think that the raw footage, like, that's where Ryan's piece is, right? Because Ryan is not, the guy has no fear, and none of, I don't think any of us really do, but the fact that, you know, he's that guy behind the camera that's willing to say, hey, I'm going to show you this, and it's going to swell your eyeballs, but it's also it should light something inside you, right, in order to do something. So I think these documentaries, at the timing that they're coming out, and the next 2 years, I'm telling you guys, we got 2 years right now. You do not know what's going to happen or what in midterms, because just because President Trump is in there, that doesn't mean anything. That's not a guarantee.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, that's absolutely right. And you know, like you said about Ryan being fearless, that's what we need, because you can't have a price. You know, everyone's got a price, it seems like, right? And you ask yourself, what's your price? Is it $1 million, $2 million? You can't have a price in this one. Your price has to be death. You have to be willing, because they're going to come after you from every angle if you try to stand up against them, every angle. And you just got to be willing to say, look, I'm willing to give my life for this child, for any child. And once you do that, you break through the barrier. I know Ryan has broken through that barrier. I know I've broken through that barrier. And that's what we need, because it's going to be a war on every front to take this on. It's that massive.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting what happens come January 20th.
It's spiritual, and you know that, and that's the part that I think is important to talk about. It's you're not just working with humans. You're working with demons, against demons. It's when you get into this battle, you start seeing it really clearly. You start seeing the things you can't see with your physical eyes coming at you. It's a spiritual battle, and it's not just the border, right? It's all through our politics. It's through this culture shift that I would say the devil is trying to influence, and his target is children. And there's nothing like the image of God like a child. Anyone who's seen a child be born or raised, you know, there's nothing more godly than that, than this innocent child. Nothing that manifests God and his image like a child. And so, of course, that's what Satan's going to hit hardest, and doing it through any ways, you know, giving kids porn at 3rd grade, calling it sex education, changing the name from pedophiles to minor attracted persons. You know, they package it in a nice way to make you think you're doing something good. This movement to what I call the transgender hoist or foist on children. Like, I'm very libertarian when it comes to adults, but I'm talking about when you're taking parental rights away, like they've done in Washington and Oregon and California, that a parent can go to jail for telling their 12-year-old, you can't cut your genitals off. The pedophiles are watching this, and they're loving this, because all the things I just said has been the pedophile agenda from the 50s. And now the left is promoting them. And they're sitting back going, you're doing it for us. Because once that child is sexualized under our sex education, you know, facade, now they're 11, 12 years old. And if they have the right to identify as whatever they want and cut their genitals off without their parents being able to stop it, then they'll have the right to say, hey, I identify as a 20-year-old. And I want to have sex with a 40-year-old who identifies as a 15-year-old anyway, so we're cool. See, we're setting the stage with all these policies that the adversary has gotten into to destroy children. And so it's not just border, it's everywhere. It's everything. It's policy. And so that's why I say it's going to be a bloodbath, and it's going to take people who are absolutely fearless to stand up in the face of it and be called everything, be attacked in every way, in order to save these kids.
Well, Tim, you just gave me an opportunity to reiterate something I've said a few times on here, and it's more of a challenge to anybody that's on this show, watching this show, that's a Christian, that's a Jewish person, that's a Messianic person, any of those, the major faiths of the Bible. I want you to listen to me loud and clear. The LGBTQ ampersand alphabet soup movement has been accepted by all of you. And that if all of you are going to continue to accept this kind of stuff, it's only a matter of time until you're accepting the whole pedophilia agenda. It is on all the people of faith. I'm telling you this because it's been promoted in almost every church now. It's being promoted in Jewish sects now. It's being promoted in Messianic places. Everybody just wants to accept everybody and think it's all love, right? This is not right. It says only a matter of time until society accepts this, and then it's over. There's nothing else left. So that's my challenge.
And that was the fall. And you're exactly right. And history has proven it. The fall of the Roman Empire, the fall of ancient Greece, when they introduced and legitimized pedophilia, that was the end. That was the end, because those now thousands, hundreds of thousands of abused children, they become the leaders, and then it's over. They've already been demonized and destroyed, and I mean, history has shown us two of the great civilizations of the world fell once pedophilia was legitimized, and that's the fast track we are on in our country.
Yep, 100% accurate. Tim, well, it was an honor, man. I'm really glad that we finally connected and that we were able to talk today. I mean, I know these are dark things, but you and I both know it's not going to get any lighter until we get in the fight and start fixing it. So I really appreciate your time, and let's continue to stay in touch and get you back on here.
Absolutely, bro. Thank you so much, man. Thanks for all you're doing. Keep it up, and I'll come back anytime.
All right, sounds good, man. Appreciate it.
All right, thanks.
Thanks. All right, ladies and gentlemen, hope you guys enjoyed tonight's episode. There was a lot of stuff to unpack there. Tim is a great guy. I'm convinced he is an American hero, and I encourage you to follow him and support all of his work. And if you guys are watching this video, hit the like button for me. Send the link out to everybody so they can see the video. And I appreciate all you. I'm not sure who we're going to have on next week just yet, but everything's still in the works. So we will see you again next week.